All right. Hi, Bellerive. Let's try this one. You'll get a story read to you. It's on the screen. And you'll get a little exercise. This is called a day at Bellerive. Start in the sitting position, and every time you hear a word that begins with a letter B, you would stand up. When you're standing and you hear a word with a letter B, you sit down. Let's give this a try together. A day at Bellerive. I stand up. One day, Billy Bob brought many beautiful bouquets of flowers to Bellerive. He brought some for Mrs. Barker, Mrs. Bockel, Mrs. Burkhart, Mrs. Beale, Mrs. Burden, Mrs. Berry, and Mrs. Bailey. Billy Bob was biking to Bellerive with the beautiful bouquets in his backpack. Woo! Now, that's only the first paragraph. There's more to come. Don't forget to check your space. Again, have a good chair, have some standing up space. Have fun with a day at Bellerive. When Billy Bob arrived at Bellerive, he backed his bike into the birch tree located at the back of Bellerive and locked it with his silver and black bicycle lock. Billy Bob then bounded into the building to bring the beautiful bouquets. You doing okay, Bellerive? That doesn't count. Here comes the next one. Billy Bob brought the first two bouquets to Mrs. Barker and Mrs. Bockel. Upon seeing the beautiful bouquets, Mrs. Barker and Mrs. Bockel begged Billy Bob to tell them where he bought such beautiful bouquets before bringing them to Bellerive on his black bike. But Billy Bob would not tell them, so Mrs. Barker and Mrs. Bockel just said, "Thank you, Billy Bob." Woo! It's okay if you get mixed up. If you're sitting, stand. If you stand, sit. Here's the next part. Mrs. Burkhart was just beginning her day at Bellerive when Billy Bob burst through her door to bring her a bouquet of beautiful flowers. Mrs. Burkhart could not believe the breathtaking beauty of the bouquet and asked Billy Bob, "Are these beautiful flowers begonias?" Billy Bob said no and bounced off down the Bellerive Hall. Mrs. Beale had just finished feeding Bruno, the boa constrictor, when Billy Bob walked through the door holding something behind his back. Mrs. Beale said, "Billy Bob, what is behind your back?" as Billy Bob brought the surprise from behind his back to show Mrs. Beale, a bee started buzzing around the beautiful bouquet of flowers, disrupting Billy Bob's presentation. Mrs. Beale broke a bottle of black ink as she bolted from the buzzing bee towards the back door. Billy Bob yelled, "Put on the brakes, Mrs. Beale. The buzzing bee is gone." Mrs. Beale braked, backed up, and walked to Billy Bob. "Well, Billy Bob, thank you for the beautiful bouquet of flowers to brighten up my morning." "You are welcome," said Billy Bob as he barreled down the hall to catch Mrs. Burden. "Hi, Mrs. Burden," said Billy Bob as he barged up the stairs to the back door of Bellerive School. Billy Bob said, "I saw you walking across the blacktop from Mrs. Beale's window and wanted to give you this box." "What a bizarre shaped box, Billy Bob," said Mrs. Burden. "What is in the box?" Billy Bob could not say at the time because just as he brought the box closer to Mrs. Burden, a blue ball rolled into the building and hit a brick wall, which caused the blue ball to bounce up towards Billy Bob's box and bust into the box, bursting it open. The beautiful bouquet of flowers dropped from the burst open box and fell into Mrs. Burden's outstretched arms. "Brilliant catch," Billy Bob said to Mrs. Burden. "You should play ball with reflexes like that." Mrs. Burden said, "But Billy Bob, where did you buy such a beautiful bouquet of brightly colored flowers?" Billy Bob was about to answer, but he bolted off to find Mrs. Barry and Mrs. Bailey. Billy Bob knew he could find them both in the back of the office. Billy Bob had two more bouquets to bring before the bell would ring. He leapt up the broken step and bounded over a lunch bag left in the hall. He entered the office and blushed as he lifted the last two bouquets to Mrs. Barry and Mrs. Bailey. Both ladies said, "Billy Bob, where did you get such beautiful bouquets of blue flowers?" But Billy Bob could not answer because the morning bell rang and it was time to go to class. As Billy Bob walked briskly backwards down the Bellerive Hall, all he could say was, "Bye." Hope you enjoyed that, Bellerive. Get a little movement in during your day and a little story read to you at the same time. See you next time. Bye.